Zara Owens had exactly $3 in her checking account when the billionaire walked into the animal shelter and changed everything. She was elbow-deep in sudsy water, scrubbing kennels in the back room of Happy Paws Rescue, when her coworker Melissa burst through the door with wide eyes. "There's a man out front asking for you specifically," Melissa whispered urgently. "And Zara, he's wearing a suit that probably costs more than my car." Zara wiped her damp hands on her worn jeans and frowned. "Asking for me? Are you sure?" "Positive. He said your name and everything." Confusion settled over Zara as she made her way to the front of the shelter. She had no idea who would be looking for her, especially someone wealthy enough to make Melissa lose her composure. When she pushed through the door to the reception area, she stopped short. The man standing by the adoption board was tall, with dark hair styled perfectly and sharp features that belonged on a magazine cover. His navy suit fit him like it had been crafted specifically for his broad shoulders and lean frame. When he turned to face her, his eyes were an unexpected shade of gray-blue that caught the afternoon light streaming through the windows. "Zara Owens." His voice was deep and measured. "That's me," she said cautiously, suddenly very aware of the dog hair covering her faded shelter t-shirt and the way her dark ponytail was falling apart. "Can I help you?" He stepped forward and extended his hand. "My name is York Fitzgerald. I have a proposition for you that I think will benefit us both." Zara shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the warmth of his palm. "I don't understand. Do you want to adopt a dog?" "No." He glanced around the shelter, taking in the chipped paint on the walls and the outdated furniture. "Is there somewhere private we can talk?" Every instinct told Zara this was strange, possibly dangerous, but there was something about the directness in his gaze that made her curious rather than afraid. "We can use the back office. Follow me." She led him past the kennels where dogs barked and jumped against chain-link gates, hoping for attention. York Fitzgerald seemed unfazed by the noise and the distinct smell of animals that permeated everything. Once they were in the cramped office, Zara gestured to the only other chair and leaned against the desk. "So what's this proposition?" she asked, crossing her arms. York sat down, looking oddly regal in the plastic chair. "I need someone to pretend to be my girlfriend for the next 2 months. In exchange, I'll pay you $50,000. Zara blinked. Then she laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "Is this a joke? Did one of my friends put you up to this?" "I'm completely serious." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, handing it to her. "That's my information. I'm the CEO of Fitzgerald Global Industries. You can look me up." She stared at the card, feeling the expensive weight of the cardstock. The name sounded vaguely familiar, something she might have heard on the news. "Why me?" "You could hire a professional actress or find someone in your own social circle. My grandmother saw you volunteering at the hospital last month. She was there for a routine checkup and apparently watched you spend an hour reading to children in the pediatric ward. She told me she thought you seemed genuine and kind." York's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "She's been pressuring me to settle down, get married, produce heirs for the family legacy. It's exhausting and it's affecting my focus on work." "So you want to lie to your grandmother?" Zara felt a surge of protectiveness for this elderly woman she had never met. "I want her to stop worrying about me. She has a heart condition, and her doctor says stress isn't good for her. Every family dinner becomes an interrogation about my love life. Every holiday she introduces me to someone she thinks would be perfect." He ran a hand through his hair, mussing the perfect style just slightly. "If she thinks I'm in a serious relationship, she'll relax. She'll be happy. And when we eventually break up, I'll tell her it just didn't work out." She'll be disappointed, but at least she'll have had a few months of peace. Zara studied him, trying to figure out if he was truly this calculating or if there was something more underneath. $50,000. Yes, half up front, half at the end. It was more money than Zara had ever had at once. It would pay off her student loans from her veterinary technician certification. It would fix her car that was currently held together by prayer and duct tape. It would give her a cushion, a safety net for the first time in her 25 years. What would I have to do? She heard herself ask. Attend family dinners, some charity events, a few social gatherings. Hold my hand, laugh at my jokes, act like we're in love. Nothing inappropriate. I'll always be a gentleman. He said this matter-of-factly, like he was negotiating a business contract. How did you even find me? The hospital wouldn't give out my information. I have resources. When my grandmother mentioned you, I had my assistant track down who was volunteering that day. Your name came up, along with the fact that you work here. He gestured around the small office. I did my research, Miss Owens. You have no criminal record, you're well liked in the community, and you could use the money. It seemed like a mutually beneficial arrangement. The fact that he had investigated her should have been creepy, but Zara found it oddly reassuring. At least he wasn't completely reckless. I need to think about it, of course. York stood, somehow making the movement look graceful despite the cramped space. Take 24 hours. Call me at that number when you've decided. After he left, Zara stood in the office for a long moment, staring at the business card. Then she pulled out her phone and searched for York Fitzgerald. The results were immediate and overwhelming. Images of York at galas and business conferences, articles about Fitzgerald Global Industries and their work in sustainable energy, profiles in Forbes and Business Insider estimating his net worth at somewhere around $3 billion. $3 billion. Zara could barely wrap her mind around that number. She read about his parents dying in a plane crash when he was 22, forcing him to take over the company earlier than planned. About his grandmother, Billionaire Fitzgerald, who had helped him navigate those early years and remained his closest family. About his reputation for being brilliant but distant, focused entirely on business with no public relationships or scandals. By the time she got home to her tiny studio apartment that night, Zara had made her decision. She called the number on the card. York answered on the second ring. Miss Owens. I'll do it, she said before she could second-guess herself. But I have conditions. I'm listening. Nothing physical beyond what's necessary for appearances. No kissing unless absolutely required for the act. You treat me with respect at all times. And if your grandmother's health actually is at risk, we stop immediately and tell her the truth. There was a pause. Agreed. Can you meet me tomorrow at noon? We'll need to go over details and get our stories straight. I'll text you the address. Okay, tomorrow at noon. Zara. His use of her first name surprised her. Thank you. This means more than you know. After they hung up, Zara sat on her second-hand couch and wondered what she had just agreed to. But when she checked her bank account the next morning and saw $25,000 deposited, the reality hit her. This was actually happening. The address York had texted led her to a high-rise building in the most expensive part of the city. The doorman nodded at her like he had been expecting her, and she took the elevator to the penthouse floor with her heart hammering. When the doors opened directly into an apartment, Zara stepped out into the most beautiful living space she had ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Modern furniture in shades of gray and white created an atmosphere of sophisticated minimalism. Original artwork hung on the walls. Everything was pristine and perfect and completely unlike Zara's cluttered, comfortable home. You made it. York emerged from what looked like a kitchen, wearing dark jeans and a simple white button-down with the sleeves rolled up. Somehow he looked even more attractive in casual clothes, more real and accessible. "Can I get you something to drink? Water is fine." Zara set her purse down on a chair and took in her surroundings. "Your place is incredible. Thank you. I don't spend as much time here as I should. The office tends to consume most of my days." He handed her a glass of water and gestured to the couch. "Shall we begin?" For the next 2 hours, they crafted their story. They had met at the hospital where Zara had been volunteering and York had been visiting his grandmother. They had struck up a conversation about the children's books Zara was reading, bonded over their shared love of old movies, and exchanged numbers. They had been dating for 6 weeks now, keeping it quiet until they were sure it was serious. "My grandmother will ask about your family," York warned. "What should I know?" Zara took a sip of water. "My parents divorced when I was 10. My mom lives in Florida with her new husband. My dad is in Washington State with his girlfriend. I have a younger brother, Mason, who's in college studying engineering. We're close, but we don't see each other much." "Any past relationships I should know about?" "Nothing serious. I dated someone for a year in college, but we wanted different things. He moved to California for a job, and that was that." She met York's gaze. "What about you?" "A few relationships over the years, none that lasted more than a few months. Work always took priority." He said this without emotion, just stating facts. "My grandmother will say that I need to learn to balance my personal and professional lives. She's not wrong." "Why don't you actually date someone?" Zara asked. "Why go through this charade?" York was quiet for a moment, looking out the windows at the city below. "Because everyone who expresses interest in me is interested in my money or my status. I've learned to recognize the signs. The way their eyes light up when they see my watch or my car. The way they casually mention expensive restaurants or luxury vacation spots. I'm tired of it. And honestly, I don't have the time or energy to wade through all of that to find someone genuine." There was a loneliness in his words that Zara recognized. She had felt it herself, working long hours at the shelter for minimal pay, watching her friends from high school get married and start families while she struggled to make ends meet. Different circumstances, same isolation. "When do I meet your grandmother?" she asked. "Family dinner is this Friday night. I'll pick you up at 6. York pulled out his phone and typed something. "I'm sending you money for clothes. You'll need appropriate outfits for various events." "I have clothes," Zara protested. "I'm sure you do. But my grandmother will expect a certain standard, and I don't want you to feel uncomfortable or out of place. Consider it part of the arrangement." His tone was firm but not unkind. "There's a personal shopper at Nordstrom who can help you. Her name is Amanda. I've already contacted her." Zara wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. Her wardrobe consisted mostly of shelter t-shirts and jeans, with a few outdated dresses for special occasions. "Okay, thank you. We should exchange keys," York said, surprising her, "in case my grandmother decides to drop by unexpectedly." "She's been known to do that. You want me to have a key to your apartment, and I'll need one to yours, though I doubt she'll go there. It's just a precaution." He stood and retrieved a key from a drawer. "I'll have a copy made of yours when you give it to me." This was getting more real by the moment. Zara took the key, feeling the weight of it in her palm. "I should probably know more about you. Favorite food, hobbies, that sort of thing." They spent another hour trading information like students cramming for an exam. York liked Thai food and classic literature. He ran every morning and played tennis on weekends. He had a degree from Harvard Business School and spoke 3 languages. His favorite movie was Casablanca, and he secretly enjoyed terrible action films when he needed to turn his brain off. Zara shared her own details: feeling self-conscious about how ordinary her life seemed in comparison. She loved Italian food and spent her free time reading romance novels. She had wanted to be a veterinarian but couldn't afford the full degree, so she had settled for becoming a vet tech. She volunteered at the hospital because her grandmother had spent her final days there, and the staff had been so kind that Zara wanted to give back. "Your grandmother sounds like she was important to you," York said softly. "She raised me, really, when my parents were too busy fighting to notice they had kids." Zara smiled at the memory. "She taught me to bake and to always help others when you can. She said that's what makes life meaningful." Something shifted in York's expression, a warmth that hadn't been there before. "She sounds wise." She was. Zara stood, suddenly needing to move. "I should go. I have a shift at the shelter this afternoon." York walked her to the elevator. "Friday at 6. I'll text you the address to pick you up. I'll be ready." As the elevator descended, Zara caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. She looked the same as always, but everything had changed. She was about to enter a world she knew nothing about, pretending to be in love with a billionaire who needed her for reasons she didn't fully understand. The shopping trip with Amanda was surreal. The personal shopper took one look at Zara and immediately began pulling elegant dresses, tailored pants, silk blouses, and soft sweaters. Zara tried everything on in a daze, watching herself transform in the mirror. By the end, she had a wardrobe that would fit seamlessly into York's world. Friday arrived too quickly. Zara spent extra time on her hair and makeup, choosing a navy dress that Amanda had promised was perfect for family dinners. When York knocked on her door at exactly 6 o'clock, she took a deep breath before opening it. He stood in the hallway in charcoal slacks and a gray sweater that made his eyes look silver. For a moment, they just stared at each other. "You look beautiful," York said finally. "Thank you. You look nice too." Zara grabbed her purse, trying to calm her racing heart. In the car, a sleek black sedan that York drove himself, the tension was palpable. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," Zara admitted. "Don't be. My grandmother is going to love you. Just be yourself." He glanced at her. "Well, yourself, but with the addition of being madly in love with me." That made Zara laugh, breaking some of the tension. "Right. Madly in love. I can do that." York Fitzgerald lived in a sprawling estate on the outskirts of the city. As York pulled through the gates and up the tree-lined driveway, Zara felt her anxiety spike again. The house was massive, all stone and ivy and old money. "Breathe," York said quietly, reaching over to squeeze her hand. The gesture was probably for practice, but it helped. An older woman with silver hair and kind eyes answered the door herself. "York, darling." She pulled him into a hug before turning her attention to Zara. "And you must be Zara. I'm so pleased to finally meet you." "It's wonderful to meet you too, Mrs. Fitzgerald," Zara said, accepting the woman's warm embrace. "Please call me Elena. Come in, come in. Dinner is almost ready." The evening was less terrifying than Zara had anticipated. Elena was gracious and genuinely interested in Zara's work at the shelter. York's uncle Martin and his wife Claire were also there, along with York's cousin Sophie, a bright-eyed woman in her 30s who worked as a lawyer. "So how did my nephew manage to convince someone as lovely as you to date him?" Martin asked with a teasing grin. "It wasn't easy," Zara said, falling into the role more easily than she had expected. She looked at York with what she hoped passed for affection. "He had to ask 3 times before I agreed to give him my number." York raised an eyebrow but played along. "Persistence is a virtue." "I was impressed by how much time he spent with the children at the hospital," Zara continued, warming to the story. "He wasn't there for business or publicity. He was just there for his grandmother, and he took time to make the kids laugh. That's when I knew he was someone special." Eleanor's eyes grew misty. He has a good heart, even if he hides it under all that business seriousness. Throughout dinner, Zara found herself relaxing. The food was delicious. The conversation flowed naturally, and York was attentive without being overbearing. He rested his hand on the back of her chair, refilled her wine glass, and joined in when she told a funny story about a puppy at the shelter who had eaten an entire roll of paper towels. "I like her," Sophie whispered to Zara when they were clearing plates. "York seems different with you, lighter." After dinner, Eleanor pulled Zara aside while York was in the kitchen with his uncle. "I'm so glad York found you," she said, taking Zara's hands in hers. "I've been worried about him. He works too hard, keeps himself too isolated. But tonight, I saw him smile more than I have in years." Guilt twisted in Zara's stomach. This woman was so genuinely happy, believing that her grandson had found love. "He's special to me too," she said, and was surprised to find a kernel of truth in the words. In the car on the way home, York was quiet. Finally, he said, "You were perfect tonight, thank you. Your family is really nice. Your grandmother is wonderful. She liked you, I could tell." He drove through the dark streets, the city lights reflecting off the windshield. "That story about me spending time with the kids at the hospital was a nice touch, very believable. But true, right? You must have been there when she saw me." York's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I was there. I did talk to some of the children while waiting. I didn't realize she had noticed." "She notices everything," Zara said softly. When York dropped her off at her apartment, he walked her to the door. For a moment they stood in the hallway, and Zara was acutely aware of how close he was. "Same time next Friday?" he asked. "I'll be there." The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Family dinners every Friday and occasional events where York needed a date. A charity gala where Zara wore a stunning emerald dress, and York introduced her to what felt like half the city's elite. A business dinner where she made polite conversation with investors and their spouses. A casual lunch with Sophie, who was becoming a genuine friend. With each event, Zara found herself less anxious and more comfortable in York's world. She learned to navigate cocktail parties and formal dinners. She discovered that underneath the expensive clothes and practiced social graces, many of these people were just as uncertain and human as anyone else. And York was changing too. He laughed more freely. He told stories about his childhood instead of just discussing business. When they were together, he seemed to let down some of the walls he kept so carefully constructed. One evening after a particularly long charity auction, York drove Zara home but didn't immediately let her out of the car. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said. "Sure." "Why do you work at the shelter? You have your vet tech certification. You could make more money at an actual veterinary clinic." Zara had been asked this before, but she took a moment to consider her answer. The shelter animals need someone who cares about them as individuals, not just medical cases. A lot of them have been abandoned or abused. They need patience and love as much as they need medical care. The pay isn't great, but the work matters. Does that make sense? More than you know. York looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You actually care about making a difference. That's rare." "You make a difference too. Your company works on sustainable energy. That's important. It's business. It's profitable because people want renewable resources now." He shook his head. "You do it because you genuinely want to help. That's different." "I think you're selling yourself short," Zara said quietly. Something passed between them in that moment, something that felt dangerously real. Then York cleared his throat and looked away. "I should let you get inside. It's late." At the 2-month mark, Zara realized she was in trouble. She had started looking forward to their time together, not because of the money or the fancy events, but because she genuinely enjoyed York's company. She liked the way he listened when she talked, really listened instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. She liked his dry sense of humor and the rare, genuine smiles he gave her. She liked the way he was unfailingly kind to service staff and remembered small details about people. She was falling for him, and that had never been part of the plan. The realization hit her fully at a Saturday afternoon event at the Botanical Gardens. Billionaire had organized a fundraiser for children's literacy, and York had brought Zara along. They walked through the gardens together, his hand warm in hers, and Zara found herself wishing this was real. "What are you thinking about?" York asked, catching her staring at him. "Nothing important," Zara lied, but York stopped walking and turned to face her. "I've learned to read you over these past weeks. That's your worried face." They were standing under an arbor covered in wisteria, purple flowers cascading around them. Other guests milled about in the distance, but in that moment, they felt alone. "I was just thinking that this has been nice," Zara said carefully. "Spending time with you and your family." "It has been nice." York's voice was lower, softer. "I didn't expect that." "What did you expect?" "I thought it would feel like work, like just another business arrangement, but it doesn't." He lifted his hand and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering. "You've become important to me, Zara, more important than I planned." Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "York, there you two are." Billionaire's voice broke the moment. She approached with several other women, all smiling at the young couple. "We're about to start the auction. York, dear, I need you to say a few words." The moment was lost. York dropped his hand and turned to his grandmother with a polite smile, slipping back into his public persona. But as they walked toward the main pavilion, his hand found Zara's again, and she could feel the slight tremor in his fingers. That night, alone in her apartment, Zara forced herself to face the truth. She was in love with York Fitzgerald. Somewhere between the practiced smiles and rehearsed stories, between the family dinners and quiet car rides home, she had fallen completely and hopelessly in love with him. And she had no idea if he felt the same way, or if she was just a convincing actress playing a part. The next Friday, Billionaire announced that she was hosting a family weekend at her estate. "I want everyone there," she said firmly. "No excuses about work or other commitments, just family." "That includes you, Zara," Billionaire added with a warm smile. "I consider you part of the family now." Zara looked at York, who nodded slightly. "We'll be there," he said. "Wonderful. This Friday through Sunday, we'll have a proper family gathering like we used to." In the car afterwards, Zara's mind was racing. "A whole weekend. York, I don't know if I can keep this up for an entire weekend." "That's different from a few hours at dinner." "I know it's asking a lot. If you're uncomfortable, we can make an excuse. Your grandmother will be disappointed." "Yes, but your comfort is more important." He glanced at her. "This arrangement was supposed to make things easier, not stress you out." Zara thought about Billionaire's kind eyes, Sophie's friendship, the way Martin made terrible dad jokes to make everyone laugh. "I'll do it. For your grandmother." "For my grandmother," York repeated, but something in his tone suggested that wasn't the only reason anymore. The weekend arrived with perfect fall weather, crisp and bright. York picked up Zara on Friday afternoon, and she tried not to think about how domestic it felt to throw her overnight bag in his trunk and settle in for the drive. Billionaire had planned a full schedule. Friday night was a casual family dinner. Saturday included a morning hike, an afternoon cooking session, and an evening game night. Sunday was brunch followed by a family meeting about the Fitzgerald Foundation. "My grandmother believes in keeping the family close," York explained as they carried their bags inside. "She's convinced that most problems in the world come from people not spending enough quality time with their loved ones." "She might be right about that," Zara said. They were given separate rooms, of course, but they were right next to each other on the second floor. Zara unpacked her few belongings and tried to calm her nerves. A whole weekend of pretending to be in love with a man she actually loved. This was going to be torture. Dinner that night included not just the usual family members, but also some cousins Zara hadn't met before. The house was full of laughter and noise, so different from the quiet loneliness of Zara's usual evenings. She found herself genuinely enjoying the chaos, jumping into conversations and helping Alina in the kitchen. "You fit right in," Sophie said, bumping Zara's shoulder as they did dishes together. "I was worried York would end up with some uptight socialite, but you're real." "I'm definitely real," Zara agreed, feeling the weight of that truth. Later that night, there was a soft knock on Zara's door. She opened it to find York standing there in sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking younger and more vulnerable than she had ever seen him. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too much on my mind. Same. Want to take a walk? The grounds are beautiful at night." They slipped downstairs quietly and out into the gardens. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light over everything. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, following stone paths between flower beds and past a small pond. "Thank you for being here this weekend," York said finally. "I know it's a lot to ask. I like your family. They make me feel welcome. They adore you. My grandmother told me earlier that she thinks you're the best thing that ever happened to me." He stopped walking and turned to face her, and I'm starting to think she might be right. Zara's breath caught. "York, I know this started as a business arrangement. I know we agreed on boundaries and rules, but Zara, somewhere along the way, something changed for me." His eyes were intense in the moonlight. "I find myself thinking about you when we're not together. I look forward to our Friday dinners not because they appease my grandmother, but because I get to spend time with you. When I'm at a meeting or working late, I want to call you and tell you about my day." "I feel the same way," Zara whispered. "I've been so scared to say anything because I didn't want to ruin what we have." "What do we have?" York asked, stepping closer. "I don't know, something real, something that started as pretend but became actual." She looked up at him, her heart in her throat. "I'm in love with you, York. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did." "Zara." Her name was a reverent breath. "I'm in love with you too. I think I have been for weeks now." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "Can I kiss you? For real this time, not for show, please," she breathed. When his lips met hers, it was nothing like the brief, chaste kisses they had exchanged for appearances. This was deep and searching, full of all the feelings they had been holding back. Zara's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and York made a low sound in the back of his throat that sent heat through her entire body. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, York rested his forehead against hers. "I want this to be real. Not an act, not a business arrangement. I want you in my life for real." "Yes," Zara said simply. "Yes to all of it." They stood there in the moonlit garden, holding each other, and Zara felt like her entire world had shifted on its axis. The pretend relationship had become actual love, and it was more beautiful than anything she could have imagined. Saturday morning brought new challenges. Now that they had admitted their feelings, everything felt different. The touches weren't practiced, they were genuine. The smiles were real. And everyone seemed to notice. "You two are glowing this morning," Alina said with a knowing smile over breakfast. "Did something happen?" York and Zara exchanged glances. "We're just happy," York said, reaching for Zara's hand across the table. The morning hike was fun, with the whole family trekking through the woods on Alina's property. York kept Zara's hand in his the entire time, helping her over rough patches and pointing out different birds and plants. His cousins teased him good-naturedly about being smitten, and for once, York didn't deflect or make excuses. He just smiled and pulled Zara closer. During the afternoon cooking session, where Alina was teaching everyone her famous lasagna recipe, Zara found herself working alongside York in a companionable rhythm. They moved around each other easily, anticipating needs and stealing small touches when they could. "You two work well together," Alina observed. "That's important in a relationship. It's not just about the big romantic moments, it's about the everyday partnership." That evening's game night was competitive and hilarious. York turned out to be terrible at charades, which delighted everyone. Zara was surprisingly good at trivia, impressing even Martin with her random knowledge about history and science. "Where have you been hiding this brilliant woman?" Martin asked York. "Just waiting for the right time," York replied, looking at Zara with such open affection that her heart ached. Later, when the house had quieted down and everyone had gone to bed, York knocked on Zara's door again. "I'm not ready to say goodnight," he admitted. They lay on her bed fully clothed, talking in whispers like teenagers. York told her about his parents, about the fear and grief of losing them so young. Zara shared stories about her fractured family, about feeling like she never quite belonged anywhere. "You belong with me," York said softly. "If you want to." "I want to," Zara confirmed, snuggling closer into his arms. They fell asleep that way, wrapped around each other, and woke to sunlight streaming through the windows. For a moment, Zara was disoriented, then she remembered. This was real. York loved her. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning." They made it downstairs just in time for brunch, and if Alina suspected that York hadn't slept in his own room, she didn't say anything. She just smiled and poured them coffee. The family meeting about the Fitzgerald Foundation was actually fascinating. Alina had started the charity decades ago, focusing on education and healthcare access. Now the family gathered quarterly to discuss grants and initiatives. "Zara, do you have any thoughts?" Alina asked. "Your perspective would be valuable." Zara hesitated, then decided to speak honestly. "I think there's a real need for programs that help families access veterinary care. A lot of people have to surrender their pets to shelters because they can't afford medical treatment. If there were low-cost clinics or assistance programs, it would keep families together and reduce shelter populations." The room was quiet for a moment, then Martin nodded. "That's an excellent point. We haven't really considered animal welfare in our portfolio." "I love it," Sophie added. "It's practical and addresses a real gap in services." York squeezed Zara's hand under the table, pride evident in his expression. By the time the weekend ended and they were driving back to the city, Zara felt like something fundamental had changed. They had gone into this as two people playing roles. They were leaving as partners, as a real couple with a real future. "So what happens now?" Zara asked as York drove. "With us, I mean." "Now we tell my grandmother the truth, that the relationship started as an arrangement, but it became real." He glanced at her. "I'm not going to lie to her anymore. She deserves to know. She's going to be upset. Maybe. But she's also going to see that we genuinely love each other. That's what she wanted all along." They told Alina the next Friday at dinner. York was straightforward and honest, explaining his initial motivation and the arrangement he had made with Zara. Alina listened without interrupting, her face unreadable. When York finished, there was a long silence. Then Alina looked at Zara. "And you agreed to this arrangement because you needed the money?" "Yes," Zara admitted, feeling shame burn in her cheeks. "I'm sorry, I never meant to deceive you." Alina was quiet for another moment, then she did something unexpected. She laughed. "Oh, you too. Do you really think I didn't know?" York and Zara both stared at her. "What?" York said. "Darling, I've known you your entire life. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when you suddenly produced a girlfriend? And Zara, sweet girl, you're many things, but you're a terrible liar. You blushed every time you had to call York your boyfriend for the first few weeks. You knew." Zara was stunned. "I suspected from the start. I confirmed it when I did some checking of my own." Eleanor's expression was fond. "But I also saw that you two had potential. Real potential. So I played along, hoping that spending time together would help you both realize what I saw immediately." "You were manipulating us?" York asked, but there was no anger in his voice, only amazement. "I was giving you a gentle push in the right direction. You're both stubborn and afraid of being hurt. You needed an excuse to let your guards down." Eleanor reached across the table and took one of each of their hands. "And it worked, didn't it? You fell in love." "We did," Zara confirmed, looking at York with wonder. "We really did." "Then my only question is, when are you going to make this official?" "York, when are you going to propose?" York choked on his wine. "Grandmother, we've only been actually together for a week. You've been spending time together for 2 months. You know each other well. And I'm not getting any younger, you know. I'd like to see my grandson married before I die." "You're perfectly healthy," York protested. "For now, but one never knows." Eleanor's eyes twinkled with mischief. "I'm just saying, don't wait too long." Over the next few months, Zara and York built their relationship on the foundation they had inadvertently created. York made an effort to leave work earlier, spending evenings at Zara's apartment or bringing her to his. They cooked dinner together, watched movies, talked about everything and nothing. Zara met York's business colleagues as his actual girlfriend, and the difference was night and day. Before, she had been performing a role. Now she was simply herself, and York's pride in her was evident to everyone. York came to the shelter regularly, helping with walking dogs and even getting involved in a fundraiser. He discovered he enjoyed the hands-on work, the immediate gratification of making animals' lives better. "I've been thinking," he said one day as they were playing with a litter of puppies. "What if the Fitzgerald Foundation funded a low-cost veterinary clinic? We could hire you to run it." Zara looked up from the puppy in her lap. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. You know the need better than anyone. You'd be perfect." "York, that's an enormous opportunity." "I don't know if I'm qualified." "You're absolutely qualified. You have the medical training, the experience, and most importantly, the passion." He moved closer, a puppy trying to chew on his shoelace. "I believe in you, Zara. Let me help make your dreams a reality." Tears pricked Zara's eyes. "You're amazing. You know that?" "I'm just a man in love trying to impress his girlfriend," York said with a rare, genuine grin. The clinic became a project they worked on together. York handled the business side while Zara developed the programs and services. They found a location, hired staff, and created partnerships with local shelters and rescue organizations. 6 months after they had first met, the Fitzgerald Foundation Veterinary Clinic opened its doors. The grand opening was attended by the whole Fitzgerald family, Zara's brother Mason, who flew in from college, and dozens of community members. Eleanor cut the ribbon with tears of joy streaming down her face. "I'm so proud of both of you," she said, hugging them tightly. "This is what family legacy should be about, making a real difference." That night, York and Zara were exhausted but elated. They had gone back to York's penthouse, ordering takeout and collapsing on the couch. "We did it," Zara said, curling into York's side. "You did it." "I just provided resources. The vision was all yours." "It was ours," Zara corrected. "We're a team." York shifted, and suddenly he was on one knee in front of the couch. Zara's heart stopped. "I know my grandmother has been pressuring us, and I know we said we would take our time." York began, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "But Zara, I don't want to wait. I know with absolute certainty that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. You've made me believe in real partnership and genuine love. You've made me a better person. Will you marry me?" He opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring, elegant and classic. "Yes," Zara breathed. "Yes, absolutely yes." York slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her down into a kiss that was full of promise and joy. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Zara held up her hand to admire the ring. "Your grandmother is going to be insufferable," she said. "She's going to be over the moon," York corrected, "and she's going to take full credit for this. Well, she kind of deserves it. If she hadn't pushed you to find someone, we never would have met." York pulled her close again. "I would have found you eventually. Maybe volunteering at the hospital or at the shelter. The universe would have brought us together." "You're a romantic at heart," Zara teased. "Only with you." They called Alina immediately, despite the late hour. She answered on the first ring as if she had been waiting by the phone. "She said yes, didn't she?" Alina asked without preamble. "How did you know I was proposing tonight?" York demanded. "I saw you pick up the ring from the jeweler last week. You're not as sneaky as you think, darling." Alina's voice was full of joy. "I'm so happy for both of you. This calls for a celebration." The engagement party was a beautiful affair at Alina's estate. Friends and family gathered to toast the happy couple, and Zara's mother and father both made the trip, putting aside their differences for their daughter's special day. Even Zara's brother gave a touching speech about how he had never seen his sister so happy. "When Zara first told me she was pretending to date a billionaire for money, I thought she had lost her mind," Mason said, making everyone laugh. "But then I met York and saw the way he looks at her, like she's the most precious thing in the world. And I realized this wasn't pretend at all. This was the real deal." York stood and wrapped his arm around Zara's waist. "Your sister is the most precious thing in my world. She reminds me every day what's truly important. Not money or status or business success, but kindness, compassion, and love." The wedding took place 6 months later in the botanical gardens where they had first admitted their feelings to each other. It was a perfect spring day, with flowers blooming everywhere and the scent of wisteria heavy in the air. Zara wore a simple ivory gown that made her feel like a princess. Sophie was her maid of honor, having become one of her closest friends. York's cousin, Andrew, stood as best man, and Alina sat in the front row dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. When Zara walked down the aisle on her father's arm, she only had eyes for York. He stood at the end of the aisle looking devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, but it was the expression on his face that took her breath away. Pure love and awe, like he couldn't believe his luck. They had written their own vows. York went first, his voice steady and clear. "Zara, when I asked you to pretend to be my girlfriend, I thought I was solving a problem. I had no idea I was finding my solution to everything. You taught me that life is about more than work and obligation. You showed me what it means to live with purpose and passion. You made me believe in love when I had given up on it. I promised to always be your partner, your supporter, and your biggest fan. I promised to love you completely, in all the ordinary moments and all the extraordinary ones. I promised to build a life with you that's filled with meaning and joy." Zara's voice trembled as she spoke her vows. "York, I came into your life for money, and I stayed because you gave me something so much more valuable. You gave me love, respect, and partnership. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You helped me achieve dreams I thought were impossible. You made me feel seen and valued in a way I never had before. I promised to stand by your side through everything. I promised to challenge you, support you, and love you fiercely." I promise to build a future with you that's bigger and better than anything we could create alone." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, York kissed Zara like it was the first time and the last time all at once, deep and passionate and full of promise. The reception was a joyful celebration. They danced under string lights as the sun set, surrounded by everyone they loved. Billionaire gave a toast that had everyone in tears, talking about the power of love to transform lives and bring families together. "I may have given these two a little push," Billionaire said with a wink, "but they did all the hard work themselves. They chose to be vulnerable to take a chance on love. And look at what they've built together. A marriage, a clinic that's changing lives, a partnership that makes them both better. I'm so proud to call them family." Later, as they swayed together on the dance floor, Zara looked up at her husband. "Did you ever imagine that day you walked into the shelter that we'd end up here?" "No," York admitted. "I imagined a simple business transaction. I had no idea I was about to meet the love of my life. I was so scared that day. You were this intimidating billionaire with an insane proposition, and you were this beautiful, compassionate woman who looked at me like I was crazy." York smiled at the memory. "Best decision I ever made." "Which part, hiring me or falling in love with me?" "They're the same thing, really. The moment I hired you, I set in motion everything that led us here. So both. The first year of marriage was an adjustment. They moved into a new house together, something that felt like theirs rather than just York's or just Zara's. It was a beautiful craftsman in a quiet neighborhood, with a big yard perfect for the 3 dogs they had adopted from the shelter. Zara threw herself into running the clinic, which was exceeding all their expectations. They had helped hundreds of families, performed countless procedures, and even started a program to provide veterinary care to homeless people's pets. York remained CEO of Fitzgerald Global Industries, but he had learned to delegate better, to trust his team. He made it home for dinner most nights, and they had a standing rule that weekends were for them and their family, with no work allowed unless it was an emergency. They spent holidays with Billionaire, who continued to meddle lovingly in their lives. She had started dropping hints about great-grandchildren, which made York groan and Zara laugh. On their first anniversary, York surprised Zara with a trip back to the botanical gardens. They walked the same paths they had walked when they first admitted their love, reminiscing about how far they had come. "You ever regret it?" York asked as they stood under the wisteria arbor. "Agreeing to my crazy plan?" "Not for a single second. Do you regret asking me?" "My only regret is that I didn't realize sooner what you meant to me. I wasted weeks trying to keep things professional when I was already falling in love with you." Zara kissed him softly. "We found our way eventually. That's what matters." "I have something for you," York said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "Your anniversary gift." Inside was a deed. Zara read it in confusion, then looked up at him with wide eyes. "You bought the animal shelter." "I bought the building and land, yes. The shelter was struggling financially and I didn't want it to close. So now the Fitzgerald Foundation owns it and we're going to renovate and expand. No more working in a building that's falling apart." "York, that's incredible." Zara threw her arms around him. "You're incredible." "I'm just taking care of what matters to my wife. That shelter brought us together. Seems only right to make sure it can help other people and animals for years to come." 2 years into their marriage, Zara found out she was pregnant. She told York over dinner, presenting him with a little pair of baby booties. He stared at them for a long moment, then looked up at her with wonder. "We're having a baby." "We're having a baby," Zara confirmed, tears streaming down her face. York swept her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "I love you so much, both of you." Billionaire was beside herself with joy when they told her. Finally, she exclaimed. "I was beginning to think I'd have to meddle some more." The pregnancy was smooth, and 7 months later they welcomed a daughter. They named her Grace Eleanor Fitzgerald, after York's mother and grandmother. She had York's gray-blue eyes and Zara's dark hair, and both of them fell instantly and completely in love. Eleanor held her great-granddaughter with tears streaming down her face. "She's perfect. Absolutely perfect." Parenthood changed them both in ways they couldn't have anticipated. York discovered a capacity for tenderness and patience he hadn't known he possessed. Zara found strength she hadn't known she had, balancing the clinic and motherhood with York's unwavering support. They had help, of course. Eleanor was a constant presence, delighted to babysit and spoil her great-granddaughter. Sophie was the world's best aunt. The whole family rallied around them, creating a support system that made everything easier. 3 years after Grace was born, they had a son. They named him Henry Thomas Fitzgerald, and he had Zara's smile and York's determination. Their family felt complete. The clinic continued to thrive, expanding to 3 locations across the city. Zara had hired excellent staff, allowing her to step back slightly and focus on strategic direction, while still doing some hands-on work with animals she loved. York had taken Fitzgerald Global Industries in new directions, investing heavily in environmental initiatives and ethical business practices. Under his leadership, the company had become known not just for profitability, but for genuine commitment to making the world better. On their 5th anniversary, they renewed their vows in a small ceremony with just family present. Grace was 4 years old and took her job as flower girl very seriously. Henry, almost 2, tried to eat the flower petals, making everyone laugh. "5 years ago, I married you thinking I knew what love was," Zara said during the ceremony. "But every day since, you've shown me new depths. Love isn't just the romance and passion, though we have plenty of that. It's the way you make me coffee every morning just the way I like it. It's how you take the middle-of-the-night feedings without complaint. It's the way you support my dreams and push me to be better. It's building a life together that's bigger than either of us alone." York's vows were equally heartfelt. "Zara, you saved me. I was so focused on business and obligation that I had forgotten how to truly live. You taught me that success means nothing without someone to share it with. You gave me a family, a purpose beyond profit margins, a reason to come home every night. These 5 years have been the best of my life, and I can't wait to see what the next 50 bring." Eleanor, who was now in her 80s but still sharp as ever, gave a toast. "I've watched these 2 grow from a fake couple to a real partnership to a beautiful family. I may have given them that initial push, but everything they've built is a testament to their love, commitment, and willingness to take chances. I'm so grateful I got to see this story unfold." As the years passed, York and Zara's love only deepened. They faced challenges, of course. There were difficult times at the clinic, stressful periods at work, the normal struggles of raising children and maintaining a marriage. But they faced everything together, remembering the foundation they had built. Grace grew into a thoughtful, compassionate child who loved animals as much as her mother. Henry was energetic and curious, always asking questions and taking things apart to see how they worked. Both children grew up knowing they were loved beyond measure. The animal shelter and clinic network became a cornerstone of the community. Thousands of animals found homes, and thousands more received critical medical care they wouldn't have had access to otherwise. Zara's vision had changed lives, both human and animal. York's company continued to lead in sustainable business practices, becoming a model for other corporations. He gave talks about balancing profit with purpose, always crediting Zara with teaching him what truly mattered. Eleanor lived to see Grace graduate from high school, a proud and joyful woman surrounded by the family she had worked so hard to keep together. At her funeral, York stood at the podium and talked about how his grandmother had engineered their love story. "She saw potential where we saw a business arrangement," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She knew that sometimes people need a gentle push toward happiness. Zara and I owe everything to her meddling, her wisdom, and her unconditional love. She taught us that family is everything, and we'll carry that lesson forward." As York and Zara moved through middle age and beyond, they never lost the spark that had ignited in those early days. They still went on dates, still laughed at inside jokes, still looked at each other like they couldn't believe their luck. Grace became a veterinarian, taking over the clinic network when Zara was ready to step back. Henry went into sustainable architecture, designing buildings that worked with nature rather than against it. Both children had inherited their parents' commitment to making the world better. On their 30th anniversary, York and Zara returned once again to the botanical gardens. They were older now, with gray in their hair and laugh lines around their eyes. But when York took Zara's hand under the wisteria arbor, she felt exactly like she had the first time he kissed her there. 30 years, York marveled. It feels like both forever and no time at all. "Best business arrangement I ever agreed to," Zara said with a grin. "Best investment I ever made," York countered, pulling her close. "Though it stopped being business pretty much immediately." "When did you know?" Zara asked. "When did you first realize it was becoming real?" York thought about it. "That night after the first family dinner. You were so natural with everyone, so genuinely kind. And in the car on the way home, I realized I didn't want the evening to end. I wanted to keep talking to you, keep learning about you. That scared me, so I pushed it down. But I knew, even then. I fell in love with you at the botanical gardens that day," Zara admitted. "When you said I had become important to you, I was terrified and exhilarated all at once. And now look at us. 30 years, 2 kids, countless animals saved, a lifetime of memories." York cupped her face gently. "I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the pretending part, especially the pretending part, because it led us here." They kissed under the wisteria, and Zara thought about the scared young woman she had been, agreeing to a billionaire's crazy proposition because she needed money. She could never have imagined then that this arrangement would become the greatest love story of her life. But Eleanor had known. Somehow, that wise woman had seen what neither of them could see. She had understood that sometimes the best relationships start with the worst reasons, and that real love can grow from the most unlikely beginnings. As they walked back through the gardens hand in hand, Zara sent up a silent thank you to Eleanor. For meddling, for seeing potential, for bringing them together. For understanding that sometimes people need a little push toward their happily ever after. York squeezed her hand, and when she looked at him, she saw the same love reflected in his eyes that she knew was shining in hers. 30 years, and he still made her heart race. 30 years, and she still felt lucky every single day. The pretend relationship had become actual love, actual partnership, and actual life together. And there was nothing more real than that.